I want to begin by saying that I hope families are having a wonderful, well-deserved break. Students and educators and everyone who's had a very busy school year that we've just concluded in June. I also want to recognize today, and this is why we're making today's announcement, that there are some who are feeling anxious about what school might look like in September. This is why throughout the pandemic we've been working closely with teachers, parents, support workers, principals and vice principals, superintendents, trustees and Indigenous rights holders to ensure that health and safety in BC schools remain paramount. You'll recall that early in the pandemic the Ministry of Education issued a 5-stage approach that would allow in-class instruction to be adjusted depending on the risk of transmission and the direction that we received from public health authorities. During the March break, schools were in Stage 5, which featured the suspension of all in-class learning in British Columbia. After the March break, we moved to Stage 4, which meant that and allowed for 5,000 children of essential service workers who needed extra support in school to be accommodated in the classroom. During this period, we saw families and school communities really step up in heroic ways to provide essential services to our students. More than 75,000 meals were delivered each and every week to tens of thousands of families across the province. 23,000 technology devices and computers were loaned and arranged for students throughout the province to stay connected as we move to online remote learning. In June, we were able to do something different. Because of British Columbia's collective efforts to flatten the curve, we moved to Stage 3, which was an optional voluntary return to class. And 200,000 students safely returned to school and attended mostly on a part-time basis schools right across British Columbia. Today, we are announcing that on September 8th for the next school year, we are moving to Stage 2 of BC's Education Restart Plan. Stage 2 will see most students returning to the classroom full-time, with new and enhanced health and safety guidelines co-created with the Provincial Health Officer, the BC Centre for Disease Control, and public health experts who have so steadily guided our province throughout the pandemic. We also have an education steering committee in the Ministry of Education with membership from all education partners, parents, teachers and staff who are working hard to help us with these new guidelines and to ensure that students can safely return to school in September. The committee's work will continue to meet throughout the summer, collaboratively developing plans and providing solutions to any challenges that may arise before the new school year begins. I will say more about this and what it will mean for families, students and staff in a few moments, but first I'd like to welcome BC's Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, who will walk you through the newly updated health and safety guidelines that will ensure schools are as safe as possible when we take this next step in BC's Education Restart Plan.
As Minister Fleming has said, much work has been done in recent weeks to put those pieces together that will allow all students and teachers as much as possible to safely get back to in-class learning this September. This has not been an easy task, and it has been something that has been front of mind since the very beginning of this pandemic. When we suspended in-class teaching, the very first thing we discussed was the need to get children back into those important learning environments as soon as we could safely. We have been working together on the plan since that time. It is a robust plan that I believe puts the health and safety of our children, teachers, and staff at the top of our list of requirements. While we are still in the middle of school summer holidays, I know lots of people, families out there, students and staff, are eager to get back to school this fall, and I hear from many of you on an often daily basis. For students, being in class is about learning, about seeing friends, about getting those important emotional and social supports, as well as an important education. Being back in school is also crucial for the many parents and families to be able to work and to be able to cope with dealing with this pandemic as a community. We know that schools can safely reopen if community transmission is low. And even though we've had an uptick in the last few weeks, we know that we have flattened the curve here in BC, and we know we have what it takes to continue to keep our transmission rates low. And we've taken the measures that we needed to make sure that when we do see cases arise, we adjust our requirements to stop the transmission in those particular places. And that is working. We're seeing that now. A key aspect of a full return to school are what we've created, cohorts, or what we're calling learning groups, that will be created for every school across the province. The principle behind these learning groups is to create groups of students and staff who will remain together throughout the school year or term and who primarily interact only with each other. By creating these learning groups, students and staff within each group will be able to safely spend time together, maintaining distance as much as possible throughout the school year. And while they may not be in the same classroom, learning groups will be able to connect with each other during breaks in common areas and places like the playground, the gym, or the library, other important learning environments in the school. It also means that in the event of a case of COVID-19 in the school, the potential for transmission will be limited, and the ability for public health to quickly complete contact tracing will be far easier and far less disruptive. It also, to set the learning group size, the team that's been working on this started with 2 times the typical number of students in a classroom. So for elementary and middle school, each learning group will have at most about 60 people. And that seems like a lot. That's not all in the same classroom. But it will be segregating by grades so that there's less mingling in the school environment. For secondary school, it will be up to 120 people. And again, that's a maximum, and that doesn't mean that you will have contact with all of those people every day. It means that that is the bubble, if we will, or the learning group that will be used. Learning groups are smaller in the elementary and middle schools because it's more challenging, as we know, for younger students to maintain that safe physical distance. So we want to reduce the number of people and focus on reducing physical contact between students. Older students are also much better able to practice hand hygiene and recognize if they're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19. And as we know from the data, younger children are much less likely to get infected with COVID-19 or to pass it on to others, whereas older children are much more like young adults, where they often do not get severe infection, but they are able to pass it on to each other, so we need to be more careful in those groups. Looking to September, school is going to look and feel different. The learning groups is one example, but so are additional measures that we will need to take, and learning from what we experienced in June. So additional measures around cleaning, movement within the school, social interactions, and how they can be done safely in the school environment. The foundational rules for safe social interactions will apply in our schools as well. And that includes hand hygiene, washing hands regularly, maintaining a safe physical distance, both inside as much as possible, but in particular with those outside of your learning group, using a mask if you choose, particularly in those areas where the distance cannot be maintained, and we're talking about places like on the school buses or in hallways, and incredibly important for students, staff, and educators, staying home if you're sick. I know for many students and staff, being in the classroom is where they want to be and where they need to be. We know there are unintended negative consequences when children are not in school for a period of time. Ensuring a full return to school is done as safely as possible is my priority and the priority of the public health officers across the province. We are your school health officers, and we will be there with you through the fall. I have a great deal of confidence that this plan has been put in place will make that happen. When September comes, I ask families, employers to please continue to be flexible. One thing we have learned from this pandemic is we cannot predict the future. We are planning for a number of scenarios, and if we start to see community transmission that puts this at a risk, we will need to adjust the school schedule as well. There has been a lot of thought and consideration to reopening schools this fall, but as we have done since the start of COVID-19, we'll need to continue to learn and adapt as we go. We do know that cases may occur, and we in public health The school health officers will be there and will support the school community to manage any case that does arise and make sure that we can control the spread, as we do with many other communicable diseases that are often in our school system. And we learned about this in June. We learned how to do that, and we know that we can do it safely and efficiently. This new approach and the measures we have in place are not forever, but they are going to be for the coming school year. I do also think it gives us an important opportunity for innovation and for engaging with students across our school system and how we can manage together through this pandemic. We will be monitoring schools closely and ready to step in with any necessary support for the entire school community as needed. This is something all of us in public health take very seriously. We also recognize the importance of schools as a learning environment for our children and our future. This is about moving forward in a way that we can all feel good about and doing it in a way that is safe. Thank you.